Amongst the gifts brought by Blizzard for this Christmas, we have already gone over much of the planned arrivals for 11.1, from the changes to Mythic Plus, the changes to the raid with the new faction attached to the raid mechanics, as well as the changes to the Feat of Strength reward, as well as the Delve, giving you a new brand reward in Gilded Crest. We have left behind one extra bit of news, which was the announcement, of course, of the tier sets of 11.1, the tier sets of Season 2. Now, what we are exploring today are the, we can say, mixed reactions around these tier sets. And I have to say, while initially it sounded, a hot take, first glance, optics, pretty lazy, pretty boring, generic set of tier sets, to be fair, as I started working on this video, they kind of began growing on me a little bit. So what was the general initial not that positive reaction to the tier sets? Well, the not that positive part about the tier set was the fact that, well, the 2-piece set bonus of these tier sets, as announced by Blizzard themselves, was the idea to not give out a tier set based on each spec, but as they say, to have 2-piece set bonus designs instead split by role. Healer, tank, ranged, and melee DPS, with their 4-piece set bonus designed to be split by spec and to synergize to do something based on the 2-piece set bonus designed for all of the roles. As they say, we will utilize a unique keyword per each role, and then we are going to be using that keyword in the 4-piece set bonus to do something with it. So all of the healers are going to have insurance. So all of the classes are going to have their own insurance buff, and it reads initially the exact same. Your healing spells have a chance to apply insurance to targets, which is a hot over 15 seconds. And if the target drops below 40% HP, you instantly heal them. This is going to be the same for all of the healing specs. Then you move over to Winning Streak, which is the melee DPS version of the tier set, and based on the name itself, quite flavorful, will do just that. By having an RNG themed tier set, by having you gain stacks of damage by using some of your abilities, but another one of your abilities having a 15% chance to break the winning streak. Like Frost DK can build up the winning streak, but then has a 15% chance to break it with Obliterate. Paladin has all abilities with a chance to generate this winning streak, but then their spenders have a chance to remove the winning streak. Then you have Shaman with Enhancement Shaman that have their spenders, the Maelstrom spenders, having a chance to remove winning streak. You have Havoc Demon Hunter that can build the combo, but then Chaos Strike and Blade Dance also have a chance to remove this proc, etc, etc. Then you have Luck of the Draw, which is the tank one. You have a just generic random proc every time you take damage to get your main defensive up for 4 seconds and 15% more damage for 8 seconds after proccing it. So for Guardian, they will proc 4 seconds of Survival Instincts. Unfortunately, not Incarnation. For Paladin, they will proc 4 seconds of Guardian of Ancient Kings. DKs will proc 4 seconds of Icebound Fortitude. You have Demon Hunter that will proc Meta. Brewmaster Monk will proc Fortifying Brew, and then Prot Warrior will proc Shield Wall. And then you have the effects of the range DPS Jackpot, which, much like the name suggests, Jackpot is going to be practically the chance to proc something for free for most of the specs. So Devastation has their damaging abilities a chance to launch a Shattering Star at 3 nearby enemies. You have BM Hunter having a chance to proc a free Barb Shot. You have Arcane Mage with a chance to get yourself clear casting when you jackpot. And then later down you also have things like Shadow Priest getting you a free Void Bolt when you hit the jackpot. You have the Warlocks. They can summon a Dreadstalker when they proc jackpot, or Destruction can fire Demon Firebolts at the enemy when they proc jackpot. So that's how Blizzard designed all of the tier sets for their roles rather than the specs. You have the Jackpot of the casters, which is just proccing usually one of your abilities for free. You have the Winning Streak, which is the opposite. You have to press your abilities multiple times, increasing the effect of the buff with a chance, though, of losing it all example, when you're using another one of your abilities, Luck of the Draw is a chance to proc your main defensive, your main wall for a tank, and then Insurance is proccing more healing by having more heal over times out, with some pretty helpful spot healing in dangerous moments for free, because someone dropping to 40% HP is pretty helpful to heal them up quickly. Now, where things get slightly more interesting than this, of course, is when you introduce also the 4-piece set bonus, which is what is supposedly having to synergize with the 2-piece. So we mentioned Frost, for example, that has the growing damage increase of Frost Strike and Glacial Advance by 4%, upwards of 5 times, so 20% more damage to Frost Strike. By simply pressing your abilities, you will get this one to stack higher and higher, but you have the 15% chance to break this with Obliterate. Where's the payoff? The payoff at 4-piece for Frost is that, first of all, winning streak now stacks up to 8 times instead of 5, so 32% more damage of Frost Strike. Also, while you have a winning streak active, Frost Strike and Glacial Advance have a chance to cast a Frost Scythe at 50% effectiveness every time you cast one of these two. You have a different one, for example, this one is for Mage, where we mentioned Arcane Mage has a chance to proc the random jackpot, which gives you clear casting and 8% more damage for 12 seconds. When you get to 4 pieces and you actually do get your jackpot, you also get Ether Attunement at 100% effectiveness. So it's no longer just clear casting, no longer just 8% more damage for 12 seconds, it's also a free Ether Attunement proc. Then Fire Mage, which is more burst-centric, already has the jackpot giving you the cooldown reduction of Combustion, and when you cast Combustion yourself, you also get an extra CDR of Combustion. But when you do get to 4 pieces, your jackpot also increases your damage by 15% for 7 seconds, and if you would gain jackpot from Combustion, the duration is increased by twice as much, so by 14 seconds of damage buff, practically covering your entire Combustion window for Fire Mage. Many of these effects are actually quite thematic, even if initially it looks, as I said, kind of boring because all of the effects are the same for the different roles. The actual final effect of the 4-piece set bonus does add some extra cool variety. For example, a very good one actually for Protection Paladin is that when you have Luck of the Draw, so when you have procced your 4 seconds of Guardian of Ancient Kings, and then after that you gain your damage buff for 10 seconds, for that duration you're gonna have Shield of the Righteous refunding 1 to 3 Holy Powers and extending the duration of Luck of the Draw by half a second up to 10 seconds. So in the first 4-second window you can start spamming your Shield of the Righteous to get yourself, well, not just more damage, but also even more CDR, for example. One of the things that has been nerfed multiple times over time for Protection Paladin was their cooldown reduction. Each 3 Holy Power you spend, reducing the cooldown of your Ardent Defender and Bubble by 2 seconds. Now, with this tier set, you get to spend even more Holy Power, reducing the cooldown of 2 of your defensives even more, for example. So despite the initial skepticism of many of these effects being quite similar, of course, because their 2-piece reads the same across all roles, it does have some very cool and smooth effect. You know, Shadow Priest, not only does it feel good to get a free cast of your Void Bolt at 200% effectiveness, but also casting your main cooldown, Dark Ascension or Void Eruption, also hits a jackpot, so also insta-casts the Void Bolt for free, and then with the 4-piece set bonus, Jackpot also gives you 5 seconds of Power Infusion, with also a 15% more damage with Mind Blast and with Void Bolt, while you're under the effects of Power Infusion. So it will feel very good, for example, now for Shadow Priests to have a huge haste buff every single time they start their cooldown and they set up their first few GCDs inside either Dark Ascension or Void Eruption. And many of these are going to be thematic, just like this one. Like the Marksmanship team, which is one of the more unique ones for the 2-piece, even though it's supposedly all the same for each role. Proccing Jackpot for Marksmanship increases your auto shot damage by 200% and the time between auto shot by half a second for 10 seconds. So you're going to machine gun ranged attacks as a Marksmanship Hunter, and when you hit the 4-piece set bonus, consuming Lock and Load also fires an explosive shot at 200% effectiveness. This is better for AoE, which for a long time has been one of the weaknesses of Marksmanship. As long as you go above 4 to 6 targets in Mythic Plus, Most of these are the DPS effects, which I do feel like they are quite good. They are quite cool. Perhaps the more understandable one are to some of the melee instead of the ranged ones if they don't enjoy RNG nearly as much, right? Because as mentioned, the winning streak mechanic across all of the roles is tied to having the 15% chance to lose the stacking buff when you use one of your abilities. It might just feel like an annoyance every time you have this chance of losing the effects of your buffs at an RNG dice roll, not feeling very good. Most of the healer effects are much more straightforward. It's practically just more ways to apply this hot. For Resto Druids, the 4-piece has an extra chance when you bloom with Life Bloom to apply insurance, and when insurance is consumed or removed, it leaves behind one of your hots. In the case of Preservation, you have Verdant Embrace, now with a 4 seconds shorter cooldown, to double apply insurance to yourself and your targets for 6 seconds. In the case of Mistweaver Monk, which has the same 2-piece, of course, as all the other healers, their 4-piece is that casting Renewing Mist is going to apply insurance for 6 seconds, and the healing itself is increased by 50% in proportion to how many Renewing Mists you have out. Most of the effects for healers will be pretty much like this. Now, in case you were wondering why some of these effects seem to be drastically stronger than others, for example, Priest, you see that the hot that the Priest leaves behind is 1800% spell power over 15 seconds. Then you look at Evoker and it's 900. You look at Shaman, it's 1200% spell power, Holy Paladin it's 800, Resto Druid is 1000, and then Priest is 1800. It's like twice as much, or 70-80% stronger than the other healers. Single target is the same. The single target heal, if the target drops below 40% HP, is 877% spell power for Priest. For Evoker, it's 350. For Shaman it's 500, for Paladin it's 315, for Druid it's 480, so much lower than Priest. The reason is very simple. Priest doesn't really have that many mechanics that scale with this hot. In the case of Priest, this will not work with the Priest's Mastery. Discipline, of course, because Discipline's Mastery affects Absorb shields, so this one is not gonna count. And for Holy Priest, because it counts direct heals, which doesn't count for the hot, but also the direct healing won't even include the instacast, the instant heal if the target drops below 40% HP. So it doesn't have nearly as many ways to be buffed in the number, like for example when it comes to Evoker. Evoker's Mastery is going to heal more if the HP of the target is lower than the Evoker, and since for example the final effect procs if the player is below 40% HP, it's very likely the Evoker will have more HP than this and therefore have this heal affected by their Mastery. Same goes for Shaman. The heal of Shaman will be affected by Mastery. So obviously if it procs when the player is at 40% health or below, it will gain quite a good amount of value from the Mastery effect of Shaman. Even more with something like Holy Paladin, which does have the smallest number of spell power for both the hot and the instant heal. Well, that's because Paladin has, for example, something known as Beacon of Fate. They can double beacon to different targets, and all of the hots and instant heals of this effect will actually spread through beacon for Paladin. That's why the base number is so much lower than, as mentioned, something like a Priest. Overall, perhaps the more boring and standard effect is the one for healers, even though it is arguably the strongest one. One of the more dangerous features in both Mythic Plus and the Raid is single target spot healing of players taking quick, fast and hard to heal kind of damage, so not something you can heal as effectively with your turbo AoE hitting 5 or even 10 targets at the same time. This tier set does exactly that. Prevents players from dropping low very often because they will have this sort of parachute in this hot, which will proc for a pretty substantial single target heal if they drop below 40% HP. It will save time for the healer, it will give healer time to react, because in the time it takes them to react, this effect will have procced and will have given them a pretty substantial single target heal in the meantime. So while being perhaps the most standard and basic effect when it comes to tier sets, it is going to be one of the more QOL, quality of life improvement for healers in both the Raid and Mythic Plus, but particularly the Raid. The one that might be perhaps the more overall liked will be the one for tanks. I have seen some players, likely not tanks, complaining that I don't want to have my major wall randomly activate. Yes, you do. When you are in Mythic Plus and you are being smacked down by 8 different mobs, getting a free proc for 4 seconds of Icebound Fortitude will feel amazing. Yes, Okay, there are going to be cases where the Paladin is pressing Guardian of Ancient Kings, and right as he's pressing it, this will proc, and you will practically just overwrite or simply extend the duration of this proc, and it will feel kind of bad. But outside of that moment, getting free procs of major walls of all tanks will be very good in Mythic Plus. The one that actually might feel the more annoying will be the one for melee. As we mentioned, it is tied to RNG. So it is tied to perhaps feeling annoyed if you are edging and you have been building up the stacks of this buff. For example, for Feral, it can stack up to 10 times. You have been building this up and then you just use one Ferocious Bite, and Ferocious Bite procs the 15% chance to remove all of your stacks. And you were like 3 seconds before your cooldown came off. And now you have no more stacks of this buff when you are in your cooldowns and Bloodlust and Potion and whatever else. That might feel the more annoying overall in terms of tier sets, with the last one being the jackpot mechanic for range DPS. Perhaps this will be the one that will feel the best because of the free chance to get procs on abilities. So you're an evoker, you get a free proc of Shattering Star, you get free procs of Void Bolts, free procs of Barb Shots. You know, you don't expect it, but it comes. It's kind of nice to have it. It's much more visible, of course, because it's not a stacking 3% damage buff, for example, or a 2-second cooldown reduction on one of your abilities. It's an actual extra ability you are casting for free, so it will feel pretty nice to have that happen to your spec while you're playing. So maybe it might be the more visible one that can feel nice when it does happen, together with perhaps on par with the tank tier set, because the wall, the major defensive cooldown being active, will be quite visible, especially in Mythic Plus. But with this being said, the entire point of this video was to actually sort of walk back on the initial reaction, the eye test as reading the announcement from Blizzard. You know, the first time you read this announcement and you start reading them saying, we are actually making all of the 2 pieces the same across all roles. So you're thinking, how is this gonna be even like interesting at all? But then as I read them more, as I've seen the effects of these different features, it's kind of not that bad. It kind of feels quite good actually for quite a few of them. So since we are in a pretty merry, cheerful moment right now on the 25th of December, I felt it was a good moment to walk back on this initial judgment of these tier sets as they've been announced for 11.1. We will see, of course. Maybe after all this talk turns out all of these tier sets are terrible, they do barely any damage, or maybe even worse, only some of these will be a massive damage increase while the others will be completely terrible. But, you know, at least from the initial idea, this does not seem that bad, provided at least, especially for the melee camp of players, you're not completely hating on RNG mechanics. So for this, on the 25th of December, we can now leave each other to the rest of our festivities. Thanks, of course, as usual, guys, for watching the video, together with, of course, supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, is there a limit to how many socks can you be given for Christmas? Because I think I got the record this year. I got 9 pairs. I barely even have 9 pairs in total, and now I just doubled my count.